example, that Trump's immigration dragnet won't just be limited to criminals and gangsters. A new memo from the Justice Department outlines an aggressive new strategy to actually strip citizenship from naturalized Americans.
Allows the Trump administration to begin implementing a flatly odious and unconstitutional order on birthright citizenship.
Donald Trump is now coming after U.S. citizens and trying to strip their citizenship away because they are expressing
how one executive order destabilized the economic backbone of American citizenship. Part 1. The signature that shook the market. It started with a pen. On the first day of Donald Trump's second term, an executive order titled Protecting the Meaning and Value of American Citizenship quietly slipped into the Federal Register. No sirens, no press conference, just one signature that instantly rewired the machinery of America's economic engine. The directive was simple but seismic. Children born in the U.S. to parents who are neither citizens nor lawful permanent residents would no longer be granted automatic citizenship. The administration framed it as a clarification of the 14th Amendment. But for the institutions that power America's economy, it was an act of bureaucratic sabotage. Citizenship isn't just symbolic, it's the gateway to economic participation. It's how you enroll in school, access health care, apply for jobs, open a bank account, or start a business. Stripping that status from over 150,000 babies annually wasn't just a legal maneuver. It was the equivalent of pulling workers out of the future labor force, customers out of the market, and entrepreneurs out of the innovation pipeline. Financial analysts, policy experts, and economic forecasters began sounding alarms. If these children wouldn't qualify as citizens, what would that mean for payroll systems, Social Security projections, local tax bases? These weren't abstract concerns. They were spreadsheets, budget lines, and revenue forecasts. For decades, America's unique policy of birthright citizenship created a reliable demographic pipeline. A stable, young, and increasingly diverse population has underpinned everything from housing demand to the education sector to labor productivity. Undoing that stability throws a wrench into long-term economic planning across every level of society, from hospitals and HR departments to Wall Street and Washington. Part 2. Courtrooms, chaos, and economic contagion. The legal battle wasn't just about rights, it was about risk. The courtroom fights began immediately. Federal judges from Seattle to Maryland issued restraining orders. Civil liberties groups filed injunctions. But while the legal debate raged on television, the economic disruption was unfolding in silence. Hospitals didn't know whether to issue birth certificates. States weren't sure if these children should be counted in census data, used to allocate billions in federal funding. Human resources departments scrambled to revise dependent policies. Insurance companies began reevaluating risk portfolios, and small businesses with diverse workforces started asking, what happens if my employee's child isn't a citizen? A new kind of uncertainty took hold. Businesses, especially those in industries reliant on immigrant labor, were forced to divert resources from growth toward legal compliance. Schools hesitated to budget for incoming students. Tax preparers were unsure how to classify dependents. Every bureaucratic question triggered an economic consequence. The Supreme Court, in a narrow 6-3 ruling, didn't strike the order down, it merely delayed it. They said plaintiffs needed to refile as a class. Legally, it was procedural. Economically, it was chaos. The government had a 30-day window to implement a policy that would redefine how over 150,000 babies per year would interact with the economy. Economists warned of ripple effects, reduced consumer demand, shrinking labor pools, and ballooning public sector inefficiencies. With one order, the federal government had disrupted the entire life cycle of economic integration, from birth to retirement. Part 3, stateless at birth, stagnant for generations. How erasing 150,000 babies from the economy fractures growth. That number, 150,000, isn't just a demographic figure. It's a set of future workers, taxpayers, homebuyers, and consumers. Each child denied citizenship represents lost contributions to GDP, to local economies, to the future solvency of social insurance programs. Let's start with taxes. U.S. fiscal health relies on generational churn. Today's children are tomorrow's workforce. The people who pay into Social Security, Medicare, state income taxes, and local property taxes. Removing 150,000 citizens per year doesn't just cut the future workforce, it slices the tax base. That's not just federal pain. Local governments are hit first. Fewer citizens mean lower school enrollment. Lower enrollment means less state funding. Pediatric clinics lose patients. Local housing markets slow as young families hesitate to expand. The consumer economy, already battered by inflation and uncertainty, gets weaker. Then there's the labor market. America is already facing a demographic crisis, an aging population, record low birth rates, and rising dependency ratios. The economy desperately needs young, educated, tech-savvy workers. Instead, this policy creates a shadow class, children born here but barred from formal economic life. No college aid, no legal employment, no access to credit. It's economic sabotage with a smile. These children won't disappear. They'll live in the U.S., just outside the formal economy. That means under-the-table labor, no tax compliance, no legal protections, and increased vulnerability to exploitation. And exploitation isn't just a humanitarian concern, it's a market distortion. It drives down wages, increases workplace abuses, and disrupts fair competition. In short, it's the perfect recipe for a fragmented, unequal, and inefficient economy. Part 4. Rewriting the ladder of economic mobility. From reconstruction to regression. How ending Birthright resets the economy back 150 years. The 14th Amendment was never just a moral commitment. It was an economic blueprint. It ensured that every person born on U.S. soil could legally own property, sign contracts, go to school, get hired, and accumulate wealth. It was the base of a citizenship-linked economy. By unraveling this promise, the executive order didn't just challenge the Constitution, it erased the entry point for economic mobility. It's a deliberate decoupling of birth from opportunity. Children born to hardworking parents, many of whom contribute to the economy via taxes, labor, and consumption, are now told, "You're here, but not counted." Without documentation, the pathways to middle-class life vanish. No student loans, no federally backed mortgages, number 529 college plans, no business loans. And for the economy, that means fewer startups, fewer home buyers, fewer college grads entering the workforce. Economic mobility stalls. Wealth gaps widen. The American dream narrows. This isn't a hypothetical scenario. The U.S. has already seen how excluding populations from citizenship affects the economy. Post-slavery Reconstruction, Japanese internment, and the Bracero program all offer historical blueprints of what happens when people are allowed to work but not to belong. Economic stagnation, social unrest, and long-term structural inequality. This order isn't just turning back the clock, it's pulling the ladder up behind it. Part 5. Institutions in limbo. How hospitals, schools, and banks became the front lines of uncertainty. While the executive order targeted newborns, its ripple effects hit every major economic institution. Hospitals didn't know how to bill, schools didn't know who to enroll, banks didn't know who could open an account. Healthcare systems, already overburdened, found themselves treating stateless infants with no access to insurance, raising uncompensated care costs, which get passed on to everyone else. Pediatricians noted rising rates of missed well-child visits. Clinics began facing legal liabilities over reporting requirements. School systems were equally strained. Under the order, some states began questioning whether non-citizen children qualified for public education funding. Districts in Texas, Arizona, and Florida reported holding off on registering students born after the executive order's effective date. That meant delayed staffing, confused budgets, and a drop in federal funding tied to enrollment metrics. Then there's finance. Stateless families often can't open bank accounts or establish credit. That's not just bad for them, it's bad for the economy. Unbanked populations reduce the efficiency of capital flows, increase cash-based shadow economies, and undermine digital commerce adoption. Every modern economy depends on clear identity systems. Undermining citizenship status disrupts everything from real estate underwriting to healthcare reimbursement to financial inclusion. And once those cracks form, institutional trust begins to collapse. Part 6. The long decline or the smart reversal. What the future of America's economy hinges on now. America's economic strength has always been rooted in its population. From Ellis Island to Silicon Valley, human capital has been the currency of growth. But this executive order shifts the trajectory. Already, fertility rates are below replacement. The U.S. labor force participation rate is in decline. Productivity growth is sluggish. And now, the very policy that guaranteed economic replenishment, citizenship by birth, is being dismantled. If left in place, the economic consequences will intensify annually. Each year that passes without birthright citizenship equals a shrinking future market. Fewer workers, fewer buyers, fewer investors. America won't just be older, it'll be slower, poorer, and less innovative. Economists are calling this the silent demographic shock. It's not loud like a crash or inflation spike. It's slow erosion of opportunity, participation, and national potential. The irony is sharp. In trying to restrict who belongs, this policy risks making America a less desirable place for anyone to stay, build, or invest in. Countries competing with the U.S. for global talent are already adjusting policies to absorb high-skilled workers, students, and young families that America now appears to push away. And so the question isn't just moral, it's material. If citizenship is no longer stable, predictable, or inclusive, then the U.S. economy is no longer stable, predictable, or inclusive. The cost of exclusion. Every society draws lines, but draw the wrong ones, and you don't just exclude people, you exclude prosperity. This isn't just about immigration. It's about institutions, incentives, and the invisible scaffolding that holds the economy together. When you break the promise of inclusion, you don't just harm the excluded, you hurt the system itself. Birthright citizenship has always been a radical idea. It took a nation of immigrants and turned them into a workforce, a tax base, and a future. To undo that promise is to flirt with stagnation, invite inequality, and gamble with growth. Because if a baby born here no longer belongs, then neither does the prosperity their life might have created. Follow for weekly breakdowns of how today's policies shape tomorrow's prosperity.